If the US falls into recession in 2025, these 10 countries will collapse first. The US economy only needs to stall for a moment, and the whole world might tremble. From Asia to the Americas, millions could lose jobs. Currencies would crash, and once bustling factories might fall silent. The question is, which countries are standing on the thinnest ice? This video exposes 10 names most at risk of collapsing first if a real US economic shock hits in 2025. This content is for analysis and educational purposes only, and does not represent any political stance or organization. Let's approach everything with an open and objective mindset. Number 10. Canada, the passenger seat in America's downhill drive. Amid endless pine forests and peaceful cities like Vancouver and Toronto, few notice that Canada's economy is tightly tied to the US. Not just metaphorically, but literally. Over 75% of Canada's exports go to the US, valued at more than $450 billion annually. From oil, timber, and machinery to cars, if the US economy suddenly halts, it's like cutting off Canada's economic lifeline. Let's start with oil, the main export. The US buys nearly 60% of Canada's crude, and when a recession hits, oil prices tank. Like in 2020, Western Canadian Select plunged to just $3.5 a barrel, pushing thousands of Alberta workers into unemployment and wrecking provincial budgets. And the auto industry? Canada makes 1.4 million vehicles yearly, mostly for the US. In the 2008 recession, output dropped over 25%, triggering massive layoffs. Even the loonie, Canada's dollar, isn't immune. In 2020, it lost 10% in value, making imports from medicine to phones far more expensive. With household debt now at 180% of disposable income, many Canadian families are already on edge before any crisis begins. And if the US economy stumbles again, Canada won't escape the pain of that impact. Number 9. Taiwan. Tiny outside, heartbeat of the digital world. We tap screens, scroll phones, and boot up computers, without realizing a vital part of the tech world rests on a tiny island in the Pacific. Taiwan. Nearly 2/3 of global chips, and up to 90% of the most advanced processors, come from here. These tiny chips are in every device you use, from iPhones to Teslas. And the biggest buyer? The US, where Taiwan exported over $85 billion in electronics in 2024 alone. But if Americans stop shopping, as they do during recessions, the chip flow halts instantly. It's happened before. In a tech downturn, chip demand fell 35%, silencing factories and sending workers to benefit lines. With 70% of its GDP tied to trade, Taiwan's economy lacks cushion. In 2023, growth fell to just 1.4%, the lowest in a decade. One more jolt from the US, and this tech island could gasp for air. And don't forget currency shocks. A weak Taiwan dollar means pricier imports, higher inflation, especially for essentials like energy. Meanwhile, the TAIEX index, a market confidence barometer, reacts strongly to any chill from the West. So even as a global tech hub, Taiwan remains vulnerable. Just a sneeze from the US and their whole system could skip a beat. If Taiwan's chip industry collapses due to a US recession, how do you think the world would be affected? Who do you think will suffer the most? Share your thoughts below. Number 8. Mexico, standing on America's economic border. If the US economy is a beating heart, then Mexico is the lung breathing with every pulse. With over 85% of its exports, from cars and electronics to fruits and parts, flowing to the US each year, Mexico lives and could die with its neighbor's economy. Just in autos, Mexico ships 2.7 million cars annually to the U.S. Factories from Guanajuato to Puebla run day and night based on Detroit's orders. But if Americans stop buying cars, like they did in the 2008 crash, Mexico's engine could stall. That year, its GDP dropped 6.5%, leaving long-lasting scars. And don't forget the peso, a currency that shakes with every global tremor. In 2020, it lost more than 25% of its value, making fuel, medicine, and corn, heavily imported, suddenly unaffordable. Inflation already tops 4.7% and could surge again if prices spiral. And remittances? Nearly $63 billion was sent back from Mexicans working in the U.S. last year, money that feeds millions of families. But if jobs vanish in a recession, this lifeline may dry up. Tourism won't be spared either. Nearly 10 million Americans visit Cancun, Los Cabos each year. But they'll be first to cancel when times get tough. Mexico knows how to rise again, but when you dance too close to a giant, one stumble, and the whole floor could collapse. Number 7. Japan. When the tech giant shakes. From smooth-rolling Toyotas to PlayStations in every living room, Japan has long been a tech powerhouse on the global trade map. But few realize nearly 17% of Japan's exports, worth over $135 billion yearly, rely directly on American buyers. And when Americans tighten wallets, as they do during recessions, items like cars, TVs, and machinery are the first postponed. With over $50 billion in cars sold to the U.S. yearly, just one hiccup there could slow Japanese factories significantly. Not only that, Japan's economy is losing steam. GDP grows barely 1%, while public debt exceeds 260% of GDP, the highest among developed nations. That leaves little cushion if exports crash. On top of that, Japan imports nearly all its energy, from oil to LNG. When the yen weakens, often when the dollar strengthens during crises, energy costs spike, raising production costs. The Nikkei 225 index also panics with global investment shifts. In 2020, it lost 28% in just a few weeks. If the US sneezes again, Japan's financial markets will surely tremble. Japan is a precision machine, but if the key cog called the American consumer falls out, the whole system might grind to a halt, leaving silence in once tireless factories. Number 6. South Korea, where exports shake with every American purchase. Amid Seoul's vibrant lights and humming factories in Suwon, one silent truth shapes South Korea's fate. It lives on exports, and the heart of that flow is America. Each year, over $115 billion in Korean goods, from Samsung phones to semiconductors, head to the U.S. But if the U.S. economy stumbles, consumer cutbacks could instantly slow Korea's supply chains. Especially in semiconductors, tiny chips that run the digital world. In 2024 alone, chip exports to the U.S. topped $50 billion. But if buyers stop purchasing laptops, EVs, and phones, everything could crash. It's happened before. The 2022 chip crisis sent prices crashing, inventories piling, and stocks plummeting. A U.S. recession now could pull South Korea into a similar, if not worse, spiral, especially with household debt now over 106% of GDP, the highest in Asia. And when the one slides, as in 2020, Koreans pay more for fuel, food, and medicine, just as jobs disappear. From a peak industrial power, South Korea could slip into instability, all because the American wallet snapped shut. Number 5. Germany. The engine that won't start when America's locomotive derails. You don't have to be an economist to understand one thing. When America's locomotive derails, the cars behind it wobble. And one of the biggest cars is Germany. Every year, Germany sends over $150 billion in goods to the U.S. From luxury cars to industrial machines, America is not just a customer, it's the lifeline of the Made in Germany export model. But when U.S. consumers cut spending, when American corporations begin slashing orders, every gear in Germany's industrial engine starts creaking. The auto sector, with names like BMW, Volkswagen, and Mercedes-Benz, may be the first to feel the brake hit. Over 600,000 German cars roll into the U.S. annually, but if they sit idle in lots with no buyers, production lines must slow. It doesn't stop there. Machinery, chemicals, and high-tech equipment also rely on American demand, and when investment tightens, everything takes a hit. On top of that, Germany's economy is shaky. Near zero growth, persistent inflation, and costly energy after the Russian gas crisis. If a U.S. recession spreads globally, Germany's trade system may not just stall, it could skip a beat. Before we reach the top 5, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment on which country you think is most vulnerable if the U.S. collapses, and subscribe. Because Thailand is about to show you how even a tourism paradise can tumble when American dollars stop flowing. Number 4. Thailand, a tourist paradise on an unsteady economy. Behind the glowing sunsets in Krabi and the buzz of Bangkok's night markets lies a lesser-known truth. Thailand's economy stands on 2 fragile pillars, exports and tourism, and both bear deep marks of the U.S. In 2024, Thailand exported around $42 billion in goods to the U.S., from electronics to seafood and rubber. America is one of its top 3 trade partners, but if Americans suddenly tighten their wallets, like in 2008, orders can vanish in weeks. Then production slows, workers lose jobs, and Thailand suffers a double shock. Tourism, once worth nearly $60 billion a year, is no longer a safety net. U.S. tourists alone spend over $2 billion yearly in Thailand. But vacations are the first thing people cut when money's tight. Proof? In 2020, Thailand lost $50 billion in tourism revenue in just 1 year. Meanwhile, the baht weakens, oil prices rise, and inflation lurks. With household debt at 90% of GDP, many families live on credit cards. If income drops, there's no way out. Thailand remains a dream destination. But if America stops spending, that dream might become a financial headache hard to shake. Number 3. Cambodia, when sewing machines go silent. In Cambodia, the sound of sewing machines isn't just industry. It's the heartbeat of over 800,000 workers and the indirect livelihood of millions more. The garment and footwear sector, worth over $12 billion, makes up nearly half of Cambodia's exports. And 40% of it flows to the U.S., where consumers love Made in Cambodia for its low price and fast production. But what happens when Americans close their wallets? A mere 20% drop in demand could leave tens of thousands jobless. With wages around $200 a month, no savings can hold them up. And with 17% of Cambodians still below the poverty line, such a shock could shake society to its core. It doesn't stop there. Tourism, another key income source, is just as fragile. Angkor Wat draws over 2 million international visitors a year, with Americans making up a significant share. If a financial crisis makes them cancel, Cambodia's service sector could freeze fast, just like in 2020, when tourism revenue plunged 80% in 1 year. Add to that Cambodia's dual currency system using both US dollars and real. When the dollar strengthens and cash dries up, fuel, medicine, and machinery soar in price, directly draining people's pockets. Cambodia is a small nation, but deep trade ties to the U.S. mean any slip in Washington can hurl Phnom Penh's economy straight into the storm. Number 2. Vietnam, when an American gust can shake an entire assembly line. Picture a massive factory running full throttle, assembly lines buzzing, containers stacked with goods. That's Vietnam today, a rising hub in the global supply chain. But behind this momentum lies a critical weakness: dependence on U.S. consumer spending. In 2024 alone, Vietnam exported over $120 billion to the U.S., nearly 30% of total exports. From phones and furniture to t-shirts and sneakers, the U.S. is the biggest market. But if America hits recession, consumers cut back, and orders may vanish faster than the production line can blink. During the 2020 pandemic, Vietnam's garment exports plunged 30%, leaving tens of thousands unemployed. It's alarming when nearly 35% of the labor force depends on manufacturing and exports. It's not just exports. U.S. foreign investment, especially in electronics, is Vietnam's growth lifeline. If American firms pull the plug, capital can dry up in quarters. The VND faces devaluation pressure, raising costs of importing fuel, machinery, and fertilizer, weighing down businesses and citizens. Vietnam is on the rise, no doubt. But if America stumbles, the shock could put Vietnam in a reactive stance. A strong manufacturer, yet still fragile. If the U.S. falls into recession, which sector should Vietnam save first? Exports, investment, or tourism? Share your opinion in the comments. Number 1. Pakistan. Life suspended on a string of dollars. In a land where many families survive on money sent by distant relatives, a small shift in the U.S. can unleash a sweeping economic shock across Pakistan. In 2024, Pakistani workers sent home around $31 billion in remittances, with 15% from the U.S. For many households, it's the only way to buy rice, pay tuition, or afford medicine for aging parents. But if the U.S. slips into recession, jobs disappear, and that lifeline may vanish, leaving millions to struggle in despair. It gets worse. Pakistan's foreign reserves hover around $8 billion, enough for a few months of imports. Meanwhile, the U.S. is a major buyer of textiles, rice, and leather, all vital exports. A drop in U.S. demand could instantly freeze local production. The rupee is already weak and prone to nosedives when the dollar rises, like in 2023, when it lost 28% of its value. That made fuel, wheat, and medicine unaffordable for many. Even worse, inflation in 2024 hit 38%, among the highest in Asia. Nearly 40% of the population lacks enough food, and if exports dip, remittances fall, and the rupee collapses, Pakistan could spiral into a full-blown social crisis of instability, poverty, and mass frustration. When the world's top economy slows down, like even the most stable-seeming countries may collapse first. Vietnam, Taiwan, Thailand, or South Korea, each carries a fragile link tied to America's consumer heartbeat. Today's video doesn't just uncover risks, it shows one truth. Fast growth isn't always sustainable, especially when it rests on foundations others control. Which country do you think will recover fastest, and which will sink deepest if the U.S. falls into recession? Thanks for watching until the end. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support us in providing more balanced and realistic analyses. Drop your comments below. We always welcome thoughtful views. See you in the next video.